right, my name is Luis Majano. I was born in beautiful El Salvador in Central America. I was imported to the USA at a very tender age, and now I have been imported to Spain now. So I've been living in Spain since August of last year, so I'm closer to you guys now. I'm a computer engineer by trade. Actually, hardware engineering was my focus. CEO of Ortus. Some have called me a documentation weirdo, and that's okay. I like that. Just so you know, everything that actually we're doing, the recordings and everything, Misha has said that we're going to use something in CFcast, so hopefully all the sessions will be in CFcast as well. The lead developer is here, so you can pester him if something doesn't work in CFcast. All right, so what is this talk about? This is about security. All right, so inspiration is that applying security concerns to our web applications is really paramount, right? Every application has to have some type of security. The more that you add, the better, right? Nothing is completely secure, but the harder you make it, the better. And there's many, many forms of application security and many levels of application security. And we will talk about one today. It doesn't mean that you should only use this. It means that you should add more and some of these. I've actually prepared a workshop for you guys. It's like a 2-hour kind of workshop. That's the link if you want to take a picture or scan the code. And I just really took the time to start from zero. It actually will help you generate an application. It will help you generate a login, an authentication service. It will talk to you about cross-site scripting, about cross-site request forgery as well, and try to help you just build a very simple app with it and an API. Like I said, you can find it in GitHub. I'll show it to you here. You can see it. It's right here. And the cool thing is that we've also added the ability for you to run it in GitHub. So if you just have a GitHub account, you can click on the code right here, and if the internet allows it, you will see the code space. There you go. So you can create a code space on it, and it will actually create a command box server for you in the GitHub cloud with a MySQL database. Everything's here in the dev container. So you don't even have to install anything. You can just run it on GitHub Cloud, and you can have the whole workshop there and run it. So everything that I cover today here, it's because of this. Okay? So hopefully that will help people that have never done this before to get their feet wet and start working with some type of security paradigms. All right. So what is cbSecurity? Right? So cbSecurity has a whole gamut of features. Starting from the left to the right, we'll go, and we will start with a firewall. Okay? So this is a firewall at the application level. Okay? So requests have already passed through your web server and command box and now have reached your application. Okay? So like remember, many levels, many forms. Okay? If you have something at the web server level or the command box level, that's level 1, and then you go deeper or even through DNS, etc. So we're talking about application space here. It'll help you test against authentication and authorizations. We've also added in cbSecurity 3 the ability to test against headers. We also give you the ability for you to work with many authentication services. I know everybody has different requirements and different authentication services. We provide one, cbAuth, but actually two, cbAuth and basic auth, but we wouldn't recommend using basic auth in production unless it's a small intranet. But the idea is that we ship one with you, but you can use whatever you want. We can also give you a security service, and this is useful for you to actually do blocking methods or access methods and authentication methods within your code. Okay? So it's a very nice API for you to protect your applications. JSON Web Tokens. Who here is using JSON Web Tokens? All right, cool. More than a lot. So web tokens, of course, this gives you the ability for you to secure and build APIs very easily. It gives you all the libraries that you need. You can even sign your web tokens with an SSL certificate if you want to and go all crazy. So all those capabilities are there. CSRF, so cross-site request forgery, is also part of the suite of features, so you can protect against those, whether you're building an API or a SPA or a traditional application. And in CB3, we added a visualizer. And this basically just for development purposes or for debugging purposes, you can see the state of the firewall. So you can actually see in real time, things that are being blocked, why they're being blocked, and I'll give you a little bit of statistics of what's going on in your application in real time. All right, so it's a composition of modules that are available for you to work in your application. And let's start off with what is needed for security. So 2 things to identify. There's things about authentication, which is basically who are you, right? And then authorization, which is what are you allowed to do, okay? Very distinct things that you need to worry about, okay? So in the authentication portions, right, we validate user credentials, we log them in, log them out, we track them, right? Either in session or through a web token or whatever custom storage you use. And then on the right-hand side is, okay, now that you have authenticated, what permissions do you have, or either roles, right? Everybody does security their own way, right? And sometimes you validate nothing, right? So it's really up to you. So what is needed in cbSecurity for you to work with these 2 columns? Well, on the left-hand side, on the authentication piece, you need to work with any type of authentication service. It can be Google, it can be Okta, it can be OAuth, it can be whatever you want, your own custom one that your grandma built, it can be whatever. As long as you adhere to that interface, okay? We say, if you build those methods, that's it. Then we can work with you, okay? Like I said, it includes cbAuth by default. You can log in, log out. It'll do the session tracking for you, or session or request or cache or whatever you configure it to do. And for cbAuth, you basically say, give me some type of user service that I can work with, so I can go to the database and figure out who you are, right? And give me a specific type of user that I can know how to deal with, right? And again, very simple interfaces. Sometimes it's 2 methods, 3 methods, etc. Okay? Now, on the right-hand side, for authorizations, we also need to know how to work with it, right? So by default, we give you the capability to work with just authentication or permissions and or roles, okay? And again, you have the same interfaces, okay, that you can work with. If you do the IAuth user, basically it's just a few methods to know how to work with permissions and roles. And if you're using JWT, then a few methods to know, okay, what scopes do you want to attach to a token, right, and how to get that token. That's how you would start. I like pictures. That's the way I understand things. It's like I'm still in kindergarten. So I love pictures. So I have a lot of pictures for everything. And this is what happens, right? What are we securing in cbSecurity? Okay, like I mentioned, the client already made the request. It already hit our server. The security firewall kicks in. And then we have to go against specific rules and test against whether we're securing an event, that's a cold box event, or the URI. So you can secure the incoming URI or the event. Right? And this happens through security rules. Okay, so you are the one that defines these security rules. Or you can also do annotations. So you can actually annotate your controllers and your handlers. You can also look at headers for web tokens, right? Or you can use explicit methods in CB service and it's your domain there, right? You do whatever you need to do. So those are the areas where the security firewall is going to kick in, right? RESTful calls that are coming with a header, right? Code annotations or security rules. Those are the 3 areas that it will secure. So the question is, who does this, right? Who is validating all this? Okay, more pictures. So the ones that are validating are called validators, right? Good name, right? So you can follow the path, right? An incoming request comes in, whether it's a rule or a annotation, right? It gets discovered. And then each module per se, or each event, has to discover which type of validator will validate the incoming request, right? And then the validator executes and determines, okay, there can happen 3 things. I can allow access, and it executes, or I can block the access, right? And then when it blocks the access, you can have 3 types of blocks. It can override the event, okay? So this is great for APIs, right? I don't want to redirect the user to a login screen, right, in an API. I want to present, right, I can't even remember the code, 301 or whatever, 300 or something, and say, hey, you're blocked, right? Or it can redirect them, right? So this is a normal HTML application, right? It can redirect them to the login screen, or you can block it completely, right? It just gives you an abort and a header, and it says, no, you can't go any further, okay? So those are your choices. Okay? Okay. So those are the validators. So the cool thing about the validators is that you can have one for the entire application, but you can also have one per module, right? So ColdBox is a hierarchical MVC framework, so you can build things in small little chunks, and every chunk can validate its security according to what you design, okay? And that determines the type of authentication and authorization services to use. And then the firewall basically calls that validator and says, validator, should I allow this or not, right? And you can build your own, okay? So we ship with 4 validators, and then you can build your own, right? So the first one is an auth validator. This works with roles, it works with permissions, it works with any authentication service, and with any type of user that you create. As long as you give those specific methods implemented, it'll work with it. If you're using CFML, so who's actually using CF login and CF logout? I have a psychiatry over there that we can put you in, but thank God no, but it's still there from the olden times. But basic auth, very simple stuff. If you just want to secure for your stuff or for your team, you can use basic auth. And the JSON Web Token Validator. And the JSON Web Token Validator is different because it checks headers, and it has to do different things because it's mostly API driven, right? And of course, like I said, you can build your own validator. Okay? Right. So as a summary, right, remember you're getting a request that's coming in. Your firewall rules are going to match either the event or the incoming URL. A validator is going to be executed, right? And that is going to validate authentication and authorization. And then we have our end result that you're either blocked or you're allowed to execute. Okay. Simple WAF process. So how do these rules work? How do they look like? Okay? So rules, first of all, important. Like any other firewall, they're evaluated in the order that they are declared. Okay? So that is important. You can secure, like I said, the incoming events or the URLs, and you can use regular expressions. Who loves regular expressions here? Ooh, I know Ben does love regular expressions. I love my regular expressions. Love them and hate them. You can use them for anything here. Okay? You can whitelist patterns, so you can create patterns that you say ignore these, right? Or you can also attach roles and permissions to the different rules. And in cbSecurity 3, you can even attach IPs. So you can say this rule can only come from this IP, or even host header restrictions as well. So you can create very incredible rules according to your needs. And like I mentioned, the rules can be global, okay? Or you can create per module. Okay? So in a normal application, you can have a rule for everything, but if you create just the admin module, you can create different rules just for the admin module. And inside of that admin module, if you have other 3 modules, they can have different rules as well, all encapsulated within them. Okay? And these rules come from many places. You can create them inline, so just in traditional CFML, you can arrays and structs. You can store them in the database. So for example, in Content Box, all the rules are stored in the database, okay? And they're dynamic. You can create new rules, right? You can modify those rules. You can do them in XML and in JSON, or they can actually be dynamic. So you can actually build rules on the fly and call a service, and the service will return those rules, and they can be built on the fly. So if we want to deconstruct them, a traditional rule looks like this. Those are the keys that we say, hey, we're going to use those keys, but you're not limited to this. So we really want to make it very flexible for developers. So these are the keys that can be there, but you can add your own. So if you wanted to add your Eric rule right there, you can add your Eric rule. Up to you. Imagine your validator will do something with that, or your security service will deal with that metadata. That's up to you. So the metadata is open for you to be flexible with. You define your whitelist, what's secured, what are you going to match? You're going to match the event or the URL. Which roles do you want to attach to this rule, which permissions, which action, what's going to happen, right? You're going to redirect, or you're going to override, or you're going to block. You can override the event right here, so you can say, go to this event. Okay? You can force SSL if you wanted to. And you can also attach HTTP methods. So you can say, okay, you're going to secure all the incoming HTTP methods, or you're going to just listen to these HTTP methods. And then which IP addresses are allowed to also execute this rule. Okay? So by default, it will actually say all IP addresses, but you can also lock it down by IP address. Okay. So those are the basics of a rule, and you can extend. Okay? We give you the base, and then it's up to you to grow it. All right, now the actions also follow a pattern. So we talked about redirect, overrides, and blocks, right? Redirect to another URL, override to another event, and block with a 401. Okay, that was the one, 401. Now, a rule cannot have an action per se. And if it doesn't find an action in the rule, then what happens? Okay, so it follows by convention. We love conventions in CodeBox, right? So it'll say, okay, I'm going to look at the module settings if I'm in a module. And if there is no module, then it goes to the global settings. And it says, okay, what is then in the global settings? Okay, the default authentication action is this. Okay? And the invalid authentication event is this, right? And then the same for authorization. Okay? So this allows you to basically set the events that are going to be executed and the actions globally, and then each module can do its own thing as it sees fit. Okay? So it gives you the granularity that you want. All right, more diagrams. So those are here for you guys, but I'm not going to throw every pattern. But basically, this is what happens for every rule, right? How rules are evaluated. You come in, right, what are you matching, URL or events, right? And then if it matches a whitelist, then you skip through, et cetera, right? I mostly added them here, so when we post them, you have them, and you have nice pictures to show your team. So I'll move on from there. All right, so those are security rules, okay? So this is good because they're abstracted from your source code, right? You can store them in a database if you want. You can store them wherever you want, and they are set. Now, you can also add security at the code level, okay? So if you're paranoid, you know, you can add them in both locations if you wanted to, right? If they skip at one place, they won't skip the other place, right? So this is how a typical handler can be secured, right? It also follows cascading security. You can add the secure annotation at the component level, and every single action is going to be secure. That means that you have to be authenticated in order for you to execute it. Okay? Now, you can also be very granular and say, okay, this action, I'm also going to add the secure annotation, but this time I added a scope. Okay? And this scope means something, right? And it means something to the validator. So the validator says, hey, somebody try to execute this action. It's Nolan. Here you go. And here's reports. Okay? And that makes sense to his validator. And the validator says, okay, Nolan must have that permission. And if that permission is satisfied, then he can execute the action. Else, he is kicked out, right? Following the rule of threes, right? Block, override, or redirect. Okay. So that's the scope. And like I said, it can be a full list. And it means something to the validator. Okay? So very easily, you can create your applications and add these secure annotations, and now they're secure. Okay? Same diagram. This is just for annotations, so it's there for you guys, so you can follow the paths of what happens when somebody's trying to access your actions through annotations. All right, security URL, and that's something that it does automatically as well. How many times you want to provide a good experience? Somebody's trying to access something in your system, but they're not logged in yet, right? You click on that link, and then they get redirected to the login form. You know, you expect that when you log in again, that you're redirected to where you wanted to go, right? So all that is done as well through the cbSecurity module, and it stores a key called secure URL in the RC, and it flashes it for you, and then you can create a form and add the secure URL right there, and then when you log in, you basically just, it magically appears there for you, right? So it will magically go from one request to the other, it'll be available to you, so if somebody's trying to do a login, for example here, in this piece of code that you see, if the security URL has any length, then it will relocate to that URL, else I'm gonna take them to the dashboard, okay? And just like that, you're seeing the code of how to actually authenticate with the system. So with one line, I can provide authentication in any authentication service by just saying, hey, cbSecurity, hey, I need to authenticate somebody, here's their username, here's their password, what do you wanna do, okay? All right, the cbSecurity model. So this is, we've seen rules, we've seen annotations, but sometimes that's not enough. Sometimes we need context, we need something that's happening dynamically, and that's why we use the security model. The security model is a security helper object. It has a lot of fluent constructs. You use it by just saying cbSecure. You call that function inside of your ecosystem, and you have access to it. You can also inject it anywhere you want by just saying, hey, give me @cbSecurity, and I'll give you that module. And we're going to go through some of the different methods that are available to you for you to secure your applications. And we've organized them into a few sections. Authentication, so that's basically so you can use it to do a la carte login, logouts, and authentications. Authorization context, remember, authorization, it means what can you do in the system, which are fluent blocks. Then blocking methods, this will basically throw a not authorized exception. So if they don't actually pass the expectation, it will throw an exception. You can even secure views. This is great for you can say, hey, if you don't have this permission, do this view or do this view, okay? Utilities, so we've actually added a password generator in cbSecurity 3. So you can say, I want to generate a password. You can check IPs. You can do host name checks. And also we're adding password validation as well in the next patch. And of course, verification, so you can verify all the permissions or rules that a person has, okay? So all that is there available for you as a developer so you can start building your apps, right? So from the authentication point of view, it's really simple. It's 4 methods available to you. You can authenticate, you can get the user that is actually logged in, and are they logged in? And log out, okay? Those methods are available to you anywhere you want to use them. We also have the authorization context. These are where things can get a little bit more funky. You have the when all, and the when none functions. So you can say, when a user has these permissions, I want you to execute this closure. But if they don't, then execute that closure, okay? So then you can create fluent aspects here, so you can say cbSecurity, when the user has user admin, I want you to be able to allow them to set the incoming role. Okay? So only admins can override a role. You can do another one here. If they have a system admin, then also get the system admin role and seed it, right? Or you can do another one here. If the user is read-only, then filter the incoming data with non-classified information, okay? So these are dynamic things. These are things that depending on who you are, right, and what permissions you have, transformations can happen, right? And we use the filtering, the data filtering a lot, right? Because depending on who you are, then you can see only some things and not other things, right? And then you can use those security closures. And then in the bottom, you can see one with a success and a fail. So you can say if you have a user admin, then this happens, else that happens. Okay? So those are the authorization context methods. But then you can also do blocking methods. And these are great for APIs, right? So you can say, hey, secure. So that means that if you don't have these permissions, then throw the exception. Right? You can even add a message if you want. Secure all, you must have all of those permissions. Secure none, you must have none of those permissions, right? Another one is you have to be the same user. So that means that you can pass a user object, and that user object has to be yourself. Okay? Imagine if you are updating a profile your own profile, right? You only want yourself to update it. So you can say, hey, am I myself, right? And then if you are, then it allows it. If not, it blocks it, right? And the other one, which is secure when as well, and that is a context, that is a closure. So you can say, hey, I want you to secure when, and then you're supposed to pass something that evaluates to true or false, okay? And if something evaluates to true or false, depending if it's false, then it will throw the exception. So then you can do things like secure when there's none of author admins and you're not the same user, then it'll block. So these are all up to you. As a developer, you have the ability to do your own thing, right? The tools are there just for you to build and secure your applications as well as you want. Secure views are also easy because you can basically say, hey, if you have these permissions, this is the view that you're going to get. And if you don't have those permissions, this is the other view that you're going to get. Okay? These are the utilities that are available to you. You can create a password with all the defaults, which is 32 characters in length. Or you can say, I want to create a password, it's 16 characters, and give me no symbols. Okay? Or you can say, give me only no numbers. Okay? So you can say numbers, symbols, letters, and your length. Okay? And like I said, on the next patch, it will have also a validate password, which will validate according to these rules. So then you very easily, you can just create and validate as well, and build your UIs as you see fit. Get the real IPs and get the real hosts. These are just utilities if you want to be able to retrieve that information from the incoming request. Right, the verification methods as well. This is your API for you as a developer. You can check if somebody has those specific permissions, if somebody has to have all of those permissions, if you have none of these permissions, and the same user. Okay? Remember, we had the whens. These are just the normal ones. These are just give you Boolean verifications. Right? The other one threw an exception. This one just tells you yay or nay. Okay? So then you can use them in your views if you needed to as well. If you're using inertia, for example, or you're using other things, you can do the same thing at the view level. And then, like I mentioned, we have our security visualizer. So you can have this as an admin, and you can actually visualize how your application is being secure. You can see all the configurations for it. You can't change them. They're read-only, right? They're immutable. You don't want to be changing them this on the fly. But you can see the firewall activity. You can see how many events the firewall has seen. You can see how many blocks have occurred, how many overrides, how many redirects. Remember the 3 actions. You get also percentages out of the entire block usage. It'll give you a summary. It'll give you the block types right here, according to the counts. It'll also give you the top events by source. So it'll tell you, what are the paths that are creating all these security exceptions. So if you find a vulnerability, you can actually go and see which one is getting attacked the most. You can also try to discover all the IP addresses that are trying to do something nasty or something bad in your system, and we link them to several whois utilities, so you can actually go discover where they're coming from. Okay? There's also hosts, so you can see if somebody's trying to spoof via hosts. It'll track those as well. And then you also will see authorizations. So if somebody, you have a rogue user like Dom over there, so Dom is my rogue user, and you can see how many times Dom is trying to do something nasty with no authorization. So at least now you can track who did it and go pester them. And there's more reports at the bottom for you to actually figure out what's in the firewall. And like I said, you can discover also the security rules, and the security rules have a runner. So where are they? So I can't read them. Firewall rules. So in the firewall rules, you will see all your rules in your system, and you can type in an event or a URL pattern and say run, and it will try to tell you which firewall rule it will fire. Okay? So that way you can go in and you can actually verify that your rules actually work. Right? Right, so that's the security visualizer. And of course, you can also secure the security visualizer, right? So you can actually embed a security rule right there for the visualizer, okay? So if you can say for the security rule for this visualizer is the permission has to be the DOM admin, right? So only DOM can see it in his system, okay? So that's where he would set it, and that's the rule for the visualizer. So only he can see the visualizer as he sees fit. We've also activated firewall logs. So you can activate them, and it will create that table for you. Okay, so basically you say, hey, I want to store everything that's happening in terms of security. Just tell me the name of a table, tell me the schema, the data source, and cbSecurity will do the rest. Right? Then it will attach itself to that table, and that's where it's going to be dumping all those logs for you. Right? And then it will be up to you to actually clean them and do whatever you want with those. Okay? All right, so we've seen a lot. The security headers is also new in 3, and what we wanted is that we know that sometimes developers are lazy, right? We like to be lazy. So we wanted to add some lazy configurations for you. So we looked at the majority of security best practices. I think we analyzed over 6 different security frameworks, and we grabbed basically what we found common in all of them and brought it to this configuration. So the ones that are activated, those are security headers that are activated by default. So just as you install it, those headers are there, right? So it'll give you a frame options protection, it'll give you HSTS protection, referrer policies, and content type options. Okay? Then it's up to you to customize the majority of headers up to your liking, right? You can create your own content security policy, you can create your own custom headers, right? You have clients that actually have to send specific headers with specific data on every request in order for the security firewalls to allow it, right? Then you could do that here, right? Secure SSL redirects, so you can do it here if you wanted to. You can do XSS protection at this level as well, allowed IPs and allowed hosts at this level as well. Okay, so you don't even have to do the rules if you don't want to. You can create at the global header level. Okay, so not even the rules will fire. It's like if you just say nothing in these IPs can access this, then it blocks it at the top level. Okay. And who here is using cross-site request forgery? It looked like this. But it's important, right? It's actually super easy to do to protect your application. With cross-site request forgery, it's basically when somebody tries to impersonate you and make you click on stuff, right? But it's super easy to protect, right? This module has been around for quite some time, and it's just the ability to create a small token. Basically, before JSON Web Tokens existed, you had a CSRF token, right? And it's the same theory, right? You are accessing and creating a token for a specific user, and then you know who they are and where it's coming from, and then you allow them to execute something, okay? We give you several methods available to you. We'll actually even build a form for you and even add JavaScript to the form so you can actually generate all that. Okay? It's very configurable as well. You can choose when that is going to be rotated, which is important. You want all your security token keys to be rotating. Okay? So if somebody actually gets a hold of that session or that rotation token, if they decrypt it or whatever, they finally discover your policy, then in 30 minutes it will change, right? So important for that, right? So you also have automatic verifiers, so you can activate that, and basically any request coming to your application will be forced to have a token, as long as it's a put, a post, a patch, and a delete, right? If it's something that is not idempotent, right, something that is changing the database, right, it will auto-verify if you need to. And then you can use those methods as you see fit to verify those CSRF tokens. Right, and then to finalize web token security. And this is really important nowadays that we're all building APIs, right? I didn't want to do this from scratch, and that we ended up building this as part of security because we were using it in so many applications. This is why I do it again. So a web token is basically a JSON packet, right? and divided in 3 areas. You have a header, which actually describes the algorithm that is being used in the token, right, and the token type. You have a payload, okay, which has many, it's basically just a structure. Okay? And then you have a signature verification, right? And you can do the signature with your secret key, or you can use it, even go fancy as using a SSL certificate. And the concept of web tokens is also similar to the CSRF. Basically, when you authenticate with a system, let's say through an API, it will generate your JSON web token with a specific secret that will be sent back to you. You store it, right? Your application stores it, and then every request must send it. Okay? That's the concept. Okay? The application will then verify that the web token has not been modified and has not been tampered with, right? And then discover who you are through the web token. A tool that I would recommend is this one called JWT Debugger. It can work with Chrome and Safari and Firefox. You can paste in your token, and it will give you the 3 areas. You can add your secret key into it, and it will actually be able to decompile it for you, and then you can use it. But we support pretty much all the different encryption algorithms that you see here are available. Okay? So you can get very funky, very secure, or you can go with the lowest level with HMAC 256. Another thing that, after building so many APIs, is the concept of storing those tokens somewhere. So we created a token storage as part of cbSecurity, and you can choose to store it in a database or in a cache or in your own objects. Okay? And you can activate that, and the storage is important because there will be attempts, right, to hijack you. And there are occasions where you want to say, hey, I want to clean all my tokens for whatever reason. Something was leaked, my secret was leaked, I want to do a panic, right? So you can do that. You can basically talk to the storage and say, kill all the tokens. And all the tokens will be completely wiped out, and then somebody that tries to use that same token is now invalid. Okay? It also gives you the ability to invalidate specific tokens. So if Dom is still a rogue developer over there, and I know his token was compromised, I can invalidate his token as well, and then that token is not usable anymore. Okay? You can also do refreshment of tokens. So you can actually do a long-lived refresh token. If you're building, for example, an Android application or an iOS application, you don't want them logging in all the time, right? You can say, okay, you're going to log in for 30 days. Okay? But I still want a normal web token as well. So we'll give you 2 tokens. We'll give you your normal web token, and we'll give you a refresh token that can be long-lived. Okay? There's also an automatic endpoint, so you can say, hey, here's my token. Is it expired? Can you give me a new one? So all that is built in for you, so you can use your web tokens. The base claims are available to you. I just documented this here. When I started learning about web tokens, I had no idea what they meant, right? And that's why I documented them for me to learn. So that's why they're there, right? The important ones I would say is the unique ID, right? That's the identifier that it's used for tampering purposes, and the subject. The subject is usually your user ID, okay? I would not recommend that you store any personal information in the tokens. Some people get away and say, because I can put anything into it, they put a lot of information. Tokens can be decrypted, right? So don't put everything on them, right? So I would recommend just put the user ID. And if you want to encrypt that, go ahead, right? That's up to you. But at least the least information you put, the better. Okay? And then, like I said, you can add as much keys into it, which they refer to as claims. Okay? And that's how they look. For example, here's my token, and here's a refresh token. And as you can see, they look pretty much the same, right? They have a unique identifier. They could have scopes, right? The subject could be different, and the expirations are the ones that are different, right? But they basically, when they're deconstructed, they basically is the structure. Okay? And then you can store whatever you want inside of them. Then you also have a service available for you, and we actually have full templates for you to start working. So very easily you can create a new application and have all these JSON Web Tokens available to you and documented, and you can work with them. I think I'm getting out of time here. Oh. Well, those are just the services available to you, but there's a specific service just for JSON Web Tokens. 5 minutes. All right, we'll leave it for questions here. Do we have anything interesting anymore? Let's see. That's the web service. Refreshment. Here, let's look at a small example. So let's look at a login, logout example. You can just create the routes for those that point to specific handler actions. And then if you can see that code, you can see that a login is very simple. You can basically just say JWT auth. I want you to attempt to log in this username and password. And if they are accepted, then return my packet with my token. Okay? And if it's invalid, then set an error. You can do a registration and even a logout. So a full login, registration, and logout of an API can be very simple when you're reusing all these techniques. You don't have to be building them from scratch all the time. Like I said, I created that workshop, so really give it a shot. It really will take you everything, since they call me the documentation weirdo, right? Everything's documented. If it loads. It's not loading. Very slow. But it's there, and if you have any questions, you can contact us in the Box team or in this course, and you can see all the steps are available to you, and it'll take you step by step to create the application, to scaffold your application, set up the server in the cloud, right? Set up the database. It also includes migrations for you, so you can actually see the data and how to do it. The connection strings for it, adding the CSS even to get some dynamic updates for you. So I try to document as much as possible to get you started, right? But like I said, important, as a rule of thumb, I would say not only do this, use some type of DNS inspection, try to use some type of WAFs, right? Everybody will try to hit you and how to penetrate your application. So the more that you can do and the more coverage and surface area that you can cover, the better, right? Right, so question, yeah? In the firewall logs. Yeah. So if you have no firewall logs, there's no visualizer. Yeah. So you choose wherever you want. But I think we'll probably add a scheduler too, so it'll do rotation.
When it's a database table, is that using ORM or is it just?
It's using vanilla SQL, no ORM. Yeah. We wanted to make it really, really fast and not have to worry about other modules. So it's pure SQL. Yeah. And it's asynchronous as well. Yeah. Yes?
So we're using this a lot in our current app, and different security things. With the names of the different rules, I've got a CFM include where I'm setting the names of the different authorization levels to variables. And then use the variables in the different spots to say if user has this permission level, do X, Y, Z things. I don't have hard-coded strings all over my app. The one spot that does not work is in the method signatures. I mean, that is a notation.
Oh, yeah, because that cannot be dynamic.
Right.
Yes.
Is there anything currently in cbSecurity that helps get rid of that kind of point, or just kind of?
Yeah, because unfortunately the metadata in CFML cannot be dynamic, right? It has to be static. So you would have to use some of the interception points, right, to do it. So you could do a pre-handler, right? Or you could do your own interceptor that listens as well. But if you're doing localized at the handler level, probably a pre-handler interception will be best. So that way you don't do hard-coded strings. Makes sense. Yeah. No more questions. Everybody wants to go protect their app now. You're being hacked right now. Big possibility, though. All right. Well, if you need us, we have the booth outside. If you want a ninja hat, go get a ninja hat that we have over there. And if you have any questions, please let us know. Oh, what?